Well, there are different reasons. One is that uh, they wanted to, you know, you got to understand this. The three major Western religions had to get close to ancient Egypt in order for their religion, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, to be real in the minds of the people. All three of those religions are tied in to ancient Egypt.
Why would they have to be tied into ancient Egypt?
Simply because ancient Egypt is the only entity of the two. Talking about ancient Egypt and religion. Ancient Egypt is the only one of the two that's real. It's not based on mythology or pseudepigrapha for their religion, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, to be real in the minds of the people. All three of those religions are tied in to ancient Egypt.
Why would they have to be tied into ancient Egypt?
Simply because ancient Egypt is the only entity of the two. Talking about ancient Egypt and religion. Ancient Egypt is the only one of the two that's real. It's not based on mythology or pseudepigrapha stories and so forth and so on. As to religion, religion relies on literature given to the believer of these religions to believe in. So the stories are there in literary form. So you have to know this, that ancient Egypt, of the two entities, are the only one of the two entities that does not need literature to sustain itself. The religions need literature to sustain itself, not ancient Egypt. Because so you can go over there and look at the greatest edifice that has ever been created on earth, which is the Great Pyramid. The Sphinx over there in the desert. All the other monuments are there. The tombs are there. The ones that wasn't pillaged by the Europeans, and the artifacts stolen and scattered all over the world, etc. Such as when in 1818, when Belzoni was sent over there by the British Museum to get artifacts out of ancient Egypt by any means necessary. And he did his thing over there in doing that, to the tune of 4 floors in the British Museum was filled with ancient Egyptian artifacts, you see. So, getting back to ancient Egypt and the religions. The religions, if you notice, all are close to ancient Egypt. They're tied into ancient Egypt. That's for a reason. Why? Because ancient Egypt is the only thing that's real. The religions, the three major Western religions, Christianity, never been a man ever walked the earth in human form by the name of Jesus Christ, never existed. Islam, there's never been a man that ever walked the earth in human form by the name of a prophet Muhammad. Judaism, there's never been men that ever walked the earth in human form by the name of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, or Moses. All religions are man-made, pagan, heathen, occult religions based on mythology. That's all religions are. So they had to, in order to make these religions real, they had to get next to something that was real. And ancient Egypt, of the two entities, does not need literature to sustain itself. But the three major religions and all other man-made religions need literature to sustain itself in the minds of the believer. You see, and then the second thing is that the Europeans coming into the continent of Africa in Egypt, we're talking about Alexander the Greek in 332 BCE. They're the first known, or he was the first known European historically to come into the continent of Africa in Egypt. Okay? And Alexander the Greek. Okay? Not the Great, but the Greek. I don't call any savage who tried to destroy my ancient Egyptian ancestors' culture and civilization great. That's for the Europeans to use that term. I don't. I use Alexander the Greek. All right? Now, Alexander and his successor, Ptolemy I Lagi, called Sotar, who took over the rule of Egypt after the death of Alexander in 323. They became the world's first Egyptians. You see, they were the first Egyptians. You see, so now,
what do you mean?
well, there's a difference between an ancient Egyptian and an Egyptian. See, an ancient Egyptian, one has to be African to be an ancient Egyptian. An Egyptian could be of anyone of any race, creed, or color, like anyone of any race, creed, or color can be an American today. So an Egyptian, you have to distinguish between an ancient Egyptian and an Egyptian. An ancient Egyptian, you have to be Africans, because the ancient Egyptians are Africans. I didn't say we're Africans, they still are Africans. And so these Greeks became the first Egyptians. Okay? And this is what is being portrayed today in different museums around the world. You go down to the Field Museum here in the city of Chicago. They have an exhibit called Inside Egypt. They show you Ptolemaic Egypt. They show you Europeans with hieroglyphic inscriptions on their sarcophagus, with hieroglyphic inscriptions on their paintings and stelas, etc., using the same pose that our ancient Egyptian ancestors posed for their paintings, for their tombs, for their culture, for their civilization, with hieroglyphic inscriptions around those poses. Okay? And this is what is being portrayed today. When you go into Las Vegas, there's a hotel called the Luxor. Those great big old statues up there with European features. See? So this confuses our people. When they look at things like that, they can't relate themselves racially to identify with the ancient Egyptians, because here you got these Europeans out there portraying themselves and emulating the ancient Egyptians, our ancestors. See? So this is what they want. They want to bring this forth. It helps them, you see, to give a false illusion to the whole entire world that they were mixed in, or they were the ancient Egyptians, and the ancient Egyptians with their keen features were white or European.
I just want you to touch on, because I think it's very important right here, is what gain is there for the Europeans to project themselves as the ancient Egyptians? Is it necessary for Europeans to steal?
See, the Europeans want to be, at this very moment, they want to be the prototype race of people on earth. They want to be great. Okay? There's nothing that comes out of Europe that can make the European great. Okay? Nothing. Because he was illiterate. He had no alphabet. Couldn't write. Couldn't read. Had no institution. So what did Europe offer for the world? Nothing. But a savage. And he's still a savage today. You see? But now here you have the ancient Egyptians who lived in the continent of Africa, in Egypt, who are African people, creating the greatest civilization that has ever existed on planet Earth. Here, the Creator, the universal Creator, used the ancient Egyptians, our ancestors, as human instruments to bring forth all of creation and civilization for the whole entire world. Everything you see around you came from the culture of the ancient Egyptians.
In terms of?
The chair, furniture, eating utensils, reading, writing, the paper, the pen, the ink. They had three forms of writing: the Meta-Neter hieroglyphic, the hieratic demotic, and the phonetic alphabet. And they were the first ones on earth to create and invent an alphabet. And the alphabet, once it's invented, can only be invented one time. See? They created mathematics, they create domesticating the earth, domesticating the animals, building brick buildings, living in brick buildings. They had it all the science, everything. Correct? No, no religion. They had a spiritual way of life, but not a religion. They knew the laws of the universe, the cosmic laws of the universe, and that's what they used, and this is what guided them. Okay? So, no religion. Religion is all man-made. But here the Europeans, they have nothing. When Alexander the Greek came into Egypt, he was in awe. When he walked into Egypt, he looked around and said, my gosh, who are these people? How did they create all this great and glorious, harmonious culture and civilization? The ancient Egyptians were in tune with nature. They were in tune with the cosmic rhythm of the universe. They were in tune with the creator of the universe. See? The ancient Egyptians had no armies and no jails. There was no corruption in ancient Egypt. Every citizen had a home, food, job, education, etc., etc. All treated fairly. The female was treated equal with the male, and so forth and so on. They had a beautiful civilization until the European came in. And that's where it began to get disrupted. See? Because he wanted to be part of that civilization and culture. He wanted himself to be made part of that. And in my book, The Historical Origin of Christianity, it will walk you through how this European, after the death of Alexander the Greek in 323, we talk about Ptolemy I Lagiit, how he wanted to get acceptance in our ancient Egyptian ancestors' sacred society, but what was rejected. But all that's in my book, The Historical Origin of Christianity.
But you're saying that the Europeans came into Egypt without a fight?
They had no fight. Ancient Egyptians didn't have no army. There was no army or jail concept, no place on earth. The only negative disruption of people among each other was in Europe.
They had armies.
No, they didn't have armies. They fought each other. They raped their women. They bludgeoned each other. They stole from each other. You see, that's their history.
Yeah, but they had armies, didn't they?
No, they didn't have to have an army because, see, the rest of the world didn't have an army.
But even against themselves, if they fought each other, did they fight each other in terms of tribes?
Tribes, but not armies,
Okay.
as we know it today.
Yeah.
You see, when the European came into this hemisphere of South and North America, the indigenous South American Indian and the indigenous North American Indian had no armies. They had no concept of fighting because they lived peacefully among each other. Okay? They may have a few little disagreements, but it was not to the point where they want to kill each other. You see? So therefore, there was no armies in South America, North America. Okay? When the Europeans went into Hawaii, there was no army there to keep them out. See, there was no jail concept there. There was no corruption there. Europeans, when they come in, he brings in corruption and brings in an army and fighting, alcohol, drugs, disease, and it goes on and on. You see? So when the European came into Africa, the Africans had no concept of fighting with an army. Like I said before, they may have argued among themselves, disagreed on certain things, but they never fought and killed each other and stole from each other where they had to put people in jail. They had no concept of that. You see? That's a European entity. See, like when the Europeans came over in this hemisphere, he was welcome. When he came in Hawaii, he was welcome. In BC, the Chinese built the Great Wall of China to keep the European out. But they had no army or jails over in China. The Indians of India, he went over in India. And you see, even during our time, that was Mahatma Gandhi. You remember Mahatma Gandhi? He went over and took India. India had no army to keep him out. You see that? And you just walk in and take over. See?
Now, you had said earlier that the European civilization,
Non-civilization.
non-civilization, was an illusion. What do you mean?
It's an illusion because they have built themselves a non-civilization and a pseudo-culture off of mythology. Okay? Now, what they did was this. They came into ancient Egypt and they destroyed the institution of our ancestors, the ancient Egyptians, down to its foundation. As you know, every building that you see erected on earth has a foundation to it. But you can't see that foundation, but you can see the building. So they took our ancestors' institutions and destroyed them down to its foundation. They used that foundation to try to build themselves an institution on. But they built themselves an institution off of lies, deceit, murder, injustice, corruption, slavery, exploitation, religion, mythology, and perverted scholarship. This is what they built themselves an institution off of. So if you take all that together, and you will find that in essence, what they created was illusion. Okay? Because when you tell lies about things, then you're setting up and then teach these lies as truths. Then you're setting up an illusion in the mass populace of the world, the people of the world. Like, for instance, the Europeans will teach you that there was a Socrates. There's never been a Socrates. Socrates was supposed to have been the teacher of Plato. There's never been a Plato. Plato was supposed to have been a teacher of Aristotle. There's never been an Aristotle. Aristotle was supposed to have been a teacher of Alexander the Greek, that he wrote so many hundreds of books, and that Alexander built a library called the Great Library for an Aristotle. There's never been an Aristotle. Now, in my book, The Historical Origin of Christianity, I tell you who built what is known as the Great Library of Egypt and why they call it the Great Library of Egypt. Okay, it's all in my book, The Historical Origin of Christianity. So then they tell you that was Herodotus. There's never been a Herodotus. They say that the Herodotus is supposed to be the father of history for them, for the Europeans. Never been a Herodotus. Then they tell you that their history, the Europeans' history, started with the Iliad and Odyssey written by Homer, 9th century Homer. Never been a Homer. You see? So the Iliad and the Odyssey and Homer is all based on mythology, something that never existed. They tell you about a Euripides. Never been a Euripides. Never been a Hippocrates or Hippocrates. See, so these people who are going to medical school and getting their degree, when they graduate, they have to take a Hippocratic oath. There's never been a Hippocrates or Hippocrates, etc. You see? That's all based off of an illusion. See, when you tell lies, it becomes an illusion. If you teach the lie from generation to generation, it becomes an illusion in an individual's mind because they take the untruth that was taught to them to be true.
Let's just deal with a couple of these pseudo-fictitious names that you deal with. For an example, you talk about Homer, Plato, Aristotle, and so forth, and you say they never existed.
Correct.
Can you give any proof of that?
Yes. The question that Walter Williams asked, if an individual insisted, well, Walter Williams, you're wrong. There was a Socrates, a Plato, and Aristotle, Herodotus, and Homer, etc., etc., and Solon, and so forth and so on. All these Greek names that I just called, supposed to have existed prior to Alexander the Greek, coming into Egypt in 332 BCE.
Correct.
My question, Walter Williams' question, has to be asked. What alphabet did these Greek names use? Because the Greeks had no alphabet. They had no alphabet prior to Alexander the Greek coming into Egypt in 332 BCE. Alexander forced the Greek language on our ancient Egyptian African ancestors. And our ancient Egyptian African ancestors, being a literate people, the only people on earth that were literate, because they invented the three forms of writing that I have previously mentioned. They applied one of their alphabets to the Greek language, which is the phonetic alphabet, misnomer today and called a Phoenician alphabet. It's never been no Phoenician to have an alphabet. That's all biblical also. Okay? And so the Greeks never had an alphabet, but it was the Greek language that the ancient Egyptians applied an alphabet to. And today, the Europeans are claiming that alphabet that our ancient Egyptian ancestors applied to the Greek language. They're saying that's the Greek alphabet. Greeks never had an alphabet. There's never been an institution that has ever come out of Greece during the time of antiquity. So, name one.
Okay. So you're saying because they had no institutions and no alphabet, they couldn't have written, they couldn't have wrote anything?
Nothing.
Homer couldn't have wrote?
No, how can he write with what? What he's going to write with? Air?
Maybe he was trained in Egypt.
No. The ancient Egyptians did not take any foreigners in their sacred society. Those were their institution of learning. They didn't take any foreigners in there, nor did they race mix during the time of antiquity. They handpicked their own African kind to study in their sacred institution. And it would never be an uncivilized, savage European Greek who could not read or write. They wouldn't run in no kindergarten over there. They would have to teach this European just basic reading and writing, alphabet. So they didn't accept any foreigners in their sacred society. No. The answer would be no.
Let's go back to the creation of history through the Bible and try to look at, unravel how that is fictitious. When was the Bible written in terms of its antiquity and its fictitiousness?
Okay.
Can we get into some of that?
Yes, first place, the Bible. Let's say the Old Testament and the New Testament, or the Holy Bible, which contains the Old and New Testament under one cover. That Bible is strictly for the Christian community of the world.
Before you answer, I just want to ask you one thing about the Greeks before I forget about it. Did the Greeks leave? Is there any literature in any form that the Greeks left or that the Romans left that we can read today that is actually an authentic writings by them that talks about what they did and their life and their worldview, etc.?
No. You cannot. These people were illiterate. They had no alphabet to write with to leave a record of that. And then you have to realize, Clemson, that these people are constantly fighting and taking and bludgeoning and murdering and raping and robbing and stealing and lying and cheating. You cannot have no academic community coming out of that type of environment, especially with one not having the alphabet or an institution to sustain their writing. What institution that they created that would, if they wrote anything, that would sustain it? There's none. You got to name an institution that they created and used during their time. Then you can say maybe there was writing left in that institution or created by that institution. They had no institution. You have to have an institution.
But they came into Egypt that was a literate country with plenty of institutions, and they were there long enough for their children to be trained, to be learning.
That's not true. That's not true, because when Ptolemy I Lagi, the successor of Alexander the Greek, Alexander died in 323, Ptolemy took over the rule of Egypt in 323. He tried to get himself admitted in and accepted in the ancient Egyptian sacred society, the same as did Alexander the Greek. Okay? But he was rejected. They didn't take any foreigners in their society. So Ptolemy I Lagi, called Sotar, the word S-O-T-R means Savior, came up with a bright idea of saying, if I can find a temple in Egypt that will accept my image and make my image into a god, and after making my image into a god, place that image into the sacred temples throughout Egypt to be worshipped right along with the deity of the ancient Egyptians, Osiris. Okay? Now, he found a temple in Memphis, Egypt to do just that. You see? And they, in Memphis, Egypt, the priests and priestess took two of their deities, Osiris and Apis, and made a composite of the two deities, and they came out with a name of Osirapis or Serapis. And they gave that name to Ptolemy I Lagi, called Sotar. You see? And this is all in my book, The Historical Origin of Christianity. And they, Ptolemy I began to go around to these various sacred temples throughout Egypt, offering his image to be inserted in their sacred society, and he was rejected. So what he did, he closed down all of those institutions. You see? And in the meantime, the Greeks still could not read or write, and the Greeks and the Romans are one and the same race. Okay? So I want to bring that out. And so therefore, there was no institutions. It had been closed down. So whatever the Greeks learned from the ancient Egyptians, the point I'm trying to make, that whatever they learned was not sustained by way of generation to generation, by way of an institution. You have to have an institution to sustain knowledge, because that knowledge that you want to sustain has to be housed in an institution to be taught to the future generations that's coming before you. You see? And those institutions were closed down. So what the Greek or the Roman learned from the ancient Egyptian, it died with that individual when he died, until the Hagia Sophia was built by Justinian and his wife Theodora in 532. Justinian and his wife built the world's first Christian church, called the Hagia Sophia, in Constantinople, Turkey. Okay, that's the world's first Christian church. 5 years later, in 537, they had finished that church, an institution, and university. The teaching staff at the Hagia Sophia were made up of African, Melkite, Coptic Egyptians. They were your faculty. They're the ones that taught the Europeans. That's where the Europeans first began to be taught anything about civilization and what is needed to sustain themselves by way of having and accepting a process of learning.